1977, I was hired, classified employee, and I directed the EOPS program. What's interesting is that I wasn't the first pick. I was the second pick, and I found out later that the first person actually questioned the salary. And I said, knowing this is the growing school district at the time, and there was all kinds of possibilities and expansion, I knew that coming in, making less than what I taught at Lenox High School, I figured, you know what, I'll take whatever you got, because I knew there would be program growth. So anyhow, I kind of lucked out. 1977, I think June is when I started.
I came in the spring of '75, and that's when we were on the quarter system. And in fact, I was down at the courts, met up with Doug Fritz, who was the head of athletics and PE at the time. And tennis was very, very hot in the area, big sport. And the courts weren't even finished. That's how new the whole area was on campus. And we were sitting on a bench watching them put the fences up. And we just talked a while and he walked around campus. And that was it. And about a month later he called and he said, "Are you still interested in the job?" And I said, "I sure am." And I came back down, and I think I took the job before he even told me how much he was going to pay. And it was a part-time job at that time, and I had all the crazy hours of nights and weekends. It didn't matter. It was great, and I was very happy to get back into teaching. I hadn't taught for about a year. I'd moved out to California. I'd taught 4 years in Texas at a private school, and had run dorms and taught tennis, coached, ran a PE program for 8th through 12th graders at a wonderful private school. So being here was very exciting, and I was happy to be here at Saddleback, and very small at the time. 4-way stop sign down at the bottom of the hill, and between classes I think there was about one place to go and sit when it was about 100 degrees sometimes. There was one place, a deli, that we could sit inside and be out of the heat.
I was hired in 1969. The second year, actually, Saddleback was in existence. The first year on this campus, they were down below somewhere. And mostly, we were out here with my family. We bought a home out here. We ran out of a home size back in Torrance when I worked at El Camino College, which I was at the time. And luckily, I happened to know the coach here at that time and whatever. So I came down here really to teach, which we call kinesiology now rather than PE. We've elevated ourselves with a title. And really to do that and coach football. And that's how I got down here. And best move I ever made in my life. Because I was thinking of living here and driving to El Camino every day, which was about 60 miles, which is not good for me. And yeah, that's how I got here.
What brought me to Saddleback College? I'll start with that because I got hired a few years after I came here as a student. I was in the Marines. I was military police on El Toro. And Connie Baker, who was the original director of the nursing program, the nurses used to come to sick bay on El Toro to get their hands-on experience. And Connie was always stopping in at the MP station at the gate to arrange for parking passes and so forth. And she was always trying to recruit us. We'd already been recruited once, so we were a little bit shy on that. But she was always telling us that they needed more men in nursing. And talking about how great Saddleback College was, this is 1969, 1970. So it was brand new and quite interesting. I'd been in college back east, and I meant to just go back and finish up there, but this sounded interesting. I enjoyed California, and I have relatives out here. So I went down and took a look at Saddleback and started taking classes, and I worked as student help for a couple of years, and when we built the science math building here at Saddleback, there was room for a second lab technician, and I took that job. And so I started as student help in probably 1972, 1971, and I became a full-time classified employee in 1974.
Well, I interviewed in the summer of 1976, and it's unique how I got here because I came to California in 1970, and I was working at St. Vincent's Hospital, and someone told me about a teaching job at Cal State LA. So I applied, never thinking that they would take me because I only had my bachelor's at the time. So I worked there for a while, and the dean noticed that I really enjoyed what I wanted to do, but she had no tenure track available. And she had told me about 2 colleges in Orange County, and I thought, Orange County, where's that? I had never come to Orange County yet. And also I had finished my master's at UCLA in '75, and they were interested in me and were willing to offer me a position. But I went to Westwood and I thought, do I really want to live here? And it was so busy coming from the Midwest, and the idea of having to get my doctorate and publishing so soon. And I was young, and I listened to Dr. Ruth Wu, who was my dean, and said, go down to Orange County and check out Rio Hondo and Saddleback, but go to Saddleback first. So I made application, and I was asked for an interview, and I drove down when Orange County was really oranges, you know, all the orange groves and the pastures and the hills, and it was absolutely beautiful, and the new housing going around. And I thought, wow, if I got a job here, maybe I could get into the housing market. And so I came early, and I came on campus, and my goal was to interview the students on campus and find out, do students really like going here? Because I didn't want to teach someplace where students weren't happy. So for an hour, I went around, introduced myself to students, and said, just tell me, do you like it here? What made you come here? And not one student said one negative thing about Saddleback. And what I remember the most is that the faculty, they were great. I thought, well, I'd like to be part of that. So I went for my interview. We were in science math in the classroom across from 122. And I walked in, and there were 7 or 8 faculty, or 6 faculty, and Del Eschbach, who was the director, and Lee McGrew, who was Del Eschbach was the dean and the director, and Lee McGrew, who was the assistant director, and then the faculty. And I remember Howard Adams and Donna Clausen and Lucy Van Alsacker. And our psych teacher, I just remember she called everybody Love, but I don't remember her name. And Pat Ryan. And Sybil Orr was part of faculty, but she wasn't there at the time. And maybe I missed one, but it was the hot seat. And they interviewed me for 45 minutes. And I think the fact that I had taken the time to go and interview students on faculty, they were impressed with that. And I think they liked that I was from out of state, from Indiana University, and out of Cal State or California University system. They liked that, but I didn't hear from them. And I didn't hear from them, and I didn't hear from them. So Rio Hondo called me and came time for an interview. So I only interviewed with the dean, and verbally she said I had the job. So verbally I said, okay. So I came the next Monday, and she was having some orientation, and I walked into the classroom, and I sat in the first desk, and who sat behind me but Dixie Bullock. So I turned around to Dixie and introduced myself, and the dean walks in, and she takes roll. And I turned around and I said, Dixie, this dean takes roll? And right away I knew I might not be a good fit. And then Dixie said, at break we talked, and she said she had interviewed at Saddleback. And I said, well, guess what? So did I. And I said, are we competing for the same job? And she said, no, they were looking for 3 positions at the time. So, you know, I left, and it was nice to meet her, and I saw her for a few more days. And I went back to Cal State LA, and I was doing some work in my office, and my office happened to be right at the end of the hallway. So anybody who walked down the nursing hallway, I saw. And it was 4:30 in the evening, and I heard some clink, it sounded like heels, and I thought, who's wearing heels here? And I looked up, and it's Donna Clausen. And she saw me, and she came to the office and sat down, and I said, Donna, I remembered her name. I said, what are you doing here? And she said, I'm finishing up my master's, and I had to drop off a few things. And she said, so what are you doing? And I said, well, you know what, verbally accepted a position at Rio Hondo. And she said, why did you do that? I think you got the position at Saddleback. And I said, it would be nice for someone to let me know. So I called HR, and in a day or two, Del Eschbach called me and said, yes, you did receive the position. And as I showed you this morning, I still have my original contract. And I want everybody to know that I made just shy of $18,000. That was my year's salary. And Del then awarded me $98 a day for 5 days to write the course that I was going to teach. It only had 3 sentences written about the description of the course. Howard Adams had gone to Texas for a year, and so he was probably geared to teach the critical care class, but now I was, and I had only been in clinical and volunteered to teach some lectures at Cal State LA because I wanted the experience. So now I have the entire course, had never really written test questions and a syllabus, and it was a learning curve for me, I must say, it really was. But I was fortunate enough to have help and guidance from Del Eschbach. She was a very, very wonderful mentor for me. And I had Dixie, because I knew her, and Donna was peds, but she was right there for me. And then Donna and I became the best of friends, as Dixie and I did. And actually, Donna was even in my wedding. She was the maid of honor in my wedding. Well, Dixie and I ended up being roommates, and you have to hear this. Dixie and I had a cubicle. It's just a little bit bigger than the dressing room for the handicap over at Macy's. It's just a little bit bigger than that. 2 desks, 1 bookcase, and 1 file cabinet that we shared. When Dixie wanted to get out of her desk, I would have to scoot myself into my desk, not impaling myself, but scoot right in so her chair could get out. And vice versa, she had to do the same for me. It was partitions where it was probably 20 inches or 2 feet from the ceiling and the same from the floor. So Ed Hubank, who was in engineering, was right next to us. He could hear our conversations, we could hear his. And right behind that just simple partition was the rock cutter. And I think his name was Lynch, maybe Tom Lynch. And it's not that I say this with well, I'm just going to say it. I don't think that the science people, math science people, enjoyed nursing combined with them in their building. And so I heard later on, and Tom and I ended up being good friends, that he tried to get us annoyed, and he would even turn on the rock cutter to polish the rocks, and there were no rocks in there. He just wanted us to hear this horrible, horrible sound. You thought you were in 2 747s. I mean, the sound was just unbelievable. And when I did have a lot of work to do, it was like walking off of a 747 that you had gone around the world. And one day I saw Dr. Lombardi in the hallway down there, and I said, Dr. Lombardi, he was our superintendent and chancellor, and I says, I want you to come and see my office. You just got to experience this. And he came in and he said, oh my goodness, the sound is horrible. And I said, yes, sit down in Dixie's chair and I'll sit in mine. Now let's try to get out. Well, it took a couple of years maybe, but we did end up in room 122, wonderful office, and Dixie had to come into the same door, which now I see they have 2 doors because there were 2 rooms there. And we ended up in that very nice office, so that was great.
I was hired in 1969 when they moved to this campus, because the first year they were up by the hospital. And I was at Kearney State College teaching. I taught 2 years there. I'd been in California twice before, and I decided, I didn't have my doctorate, and I decided that I'd come back to California. So I was hired in '69, the second year the college was open. I was hired for the position of mathematics instructor, but that only lasted about 3 months. We didn't start until late that year. I came out early and then found out that the college, they had a strike, and waited until October 1st. We were on a quarter system. And then at Christmas time, I became the division director. And I went to the party, and all the people were wondering who was going to be the division chairman. And at that time, it was the math, science, engineering division. So it was quite something.